Welcome to the Taken Hour, a quiet corner where your day can gently fade away. If this calm, sci-fi bedtime tale soothes you, remember to subscribe and let it become part of your nightly ritual. Tonight, allow your shoulders to sink, your breath to deepen, and your thoughts to drift like slow clouds. A woman returns to her apartment after a long, hazy day, shoes soft on the hallway floor. The air is mild, almost velvety against her skin. She does not yet know that time itself has decided to rest with her tonight. She closes the door behind her with a muted click, the familiar sound cushioned by the stillness of the apartment. The light from the street filters in through the curtains as a soft, bluish haze, dust floating lazily in the air, as if hanging from invisible threads. She sets her bag down and notices how quiet the building feels. No distant footsteps, no muffled music, only a round, peaceful silence. Her shoulders drop as she exhales, letting the day slide off. For a moment, she simply stands there, listening to a silence that seems almost deliberate. She walks into the living room and flicks the light switch. But the apartment glows before the bulb fully responds, as if it was already gently awake. On the wall, the old analog clock above the shelf catches her eye. Its hands are frozen in place, caught between 1 minute and the next. She tilts her head, feeling no urgency, only mild curiosity. Perhaps the battery has finally given up, she thinks. But something about the still second hand feels unusually calm, like a held breath that never becomes uncomfortable. The room feels patient, quietly waiting with her. She moves closer to the clock, footsteps wrapped in the thick hush of the room. The ticking that usually fills the background of her evenings is gone. No small mechanical heartbeat, no rhythm of passing moments. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator, stretched thin and distant, as if coming from another floor entirely. She raises a hand, but stops just before touching the glass. There is no reason for the hesitation, yet it feels right to leave the clock undisturbed. The quiet around her is not empty. It has a softness, a depth, like velvet in the air. She steps to the window and draws the curtain aside. The city is there. Tall buildings stacked like dark shapes under the night sky, dotted with familiar lights. Yet something is missing. No traffic below, no distant wail of sirens, no rumble of trains, or soft rise and fall of voices. The world outside looks exactly as it should, and yet sounds like nothing at all. The silence pours in like cool water, settling around her shoulders. There is no wind. Even the leaves in the small tree by the sidewalk seem to rest, as if listening with her. She leans against the window frame, feeling the faint chill of the glass through her sleeve. The street lamps cast small pools of amber light on the pavement, perfectly still, like frozen reflections on water. A curtain in the building across the street hangs halfway open, unmoving, as if caught in a breeze that never finished its gesture. It is not eerie, only unexpectedly peaceful, like the city has decided to pause for a moment of shared rest. Her breathing becomes slower, naturally falling in to a gentle rhythm that matches the unmoving lights and the resting shadows below. She notices that the digital clock on the microwave shows the same time as the wall clock, each number exact, unwavering. The small blinking dot that usually divides hour and minute is solid, a tiny, steady star in the dim kitchen. She watches it, expecting it to flicker, to resume its quiet dance, but nothing changes. The longer she looks, the more natural the stillness feels, as if time simply chose a place to rest and curled up there. The usual tug of schedules and tasks loosens its grip on her mind, leaving only a slow, drifting comfort. She opens the fridge, not from hunger, but habit, and the cool light spills out. Inside, jars and bottles stand like patient figures in a blue cave. She closes the door again without taking anything, listening to the gentle hum that follows, the only sound carrying through the apartment. It is soothing, like a distant lullaby sung by an old machine. Without the ticking clocks or the city noise, every small sound feels tender and deliberate. Her day's worries seem oddly far away, as if left outside in the stairwell with the echoes that never arrived. She walks to the bathroom and glances at the small clock on the shelf, the one that usually runs slightly fast. It, too, is frozen, its hands aligned in a way that feels almost decorative. The air is warm and faintly scented with soap and steam from showers past, as if every moment of her routine has been gathered into one gentle presence. She brushes her fingers under the tap and hears the water rush, clear and obedient, alive in contrast to everything else. Time has stopped, but the simple things still respond to her with quiet loyalty. Back in the living room, she sinks onto the sofa, feeling the cushions rise softly around her. The air feels thicker, like it is carrying a quiet intention, an invisible invitation to rest. She notices that her phone, lying face down on the coffee table, has not buzzed once since she entered. No notifications, no vibrations, no demands reaching into this soft silence. The apartment holds her like a gentle hand, asking nothing, offering only a pause. Her eyelids grow heavier at the edges, not from exhaustion, but from the safety of being fully unhurried. She picks up her phone and presses the button. The screen lights up, bright but strangely subdued in the surrounding hush. The time display matches the clocks in the room, frozen, yet the device shows no sign of trouble. There are no incoming messages, no missed calls. The signal bars sit calmly in the corner, as if waiting for a world that is taking a nap. Everything functions, yet nothing moves forward. It feels less like a malfunction and more like a gentle agreement, a shared decision between her apartment and something quiet beyond her understanding. She sets the phone down and focuses on her breathing, letting the air slide in and out like slow waves. In the corner of the room, the small plant on the windowsill seems to lean slightly toward the open pane, its leaves relaxed, no movement in their edges. Beyond the glass, the sky is deep and velvety, a dark canvas scattered with a few patient stars. The night feels close, almost inside the room, but in a comforting way, like a blanket spread over the building. The silence becomes familiar, like a friend who prefers listening. She notices the window is slightly open, the handle turned, yet no air moves through. The curtain hangs motionless, its fabric gently curved, holding the memory of a breeze that must have passed earlier. She moves closer and lays her hand near the opening, expecting the usual cool draft. Instead, the air feels still but pleasantly fresh, like standing at the threshold of a quiet forest at night. There is nothing pressing against her skin, no rush, only a soft presence that feels aware of her. She exhales, and the room seems to breathe out with her. As she stands by the open window, she becomes aware of a faint shimmer in the corner of her eye. Not a light exactly, but a gentle thickening of the air, as if a patch of space has decided to glow from within its own quietness. When she turns her head, the shimmer softens, blending back into the ordinary room. Yet the impression remains, like a kind smile glimpsed and then hidden. She does not feel fear, only a tender curiosity, the sensation of being noticed in a way that is neither demanding nor intrusive. She decides not to chase the shimmer, letting it be what it is. Instead, she closes the window with a slow, smooth motion, the latch settling into place with a tiny, reassuring sound. The city remains silent on the other side of the glass, like a picture that has chosen to rest. Inside, the air feels slightly warmer, wrapped around her like a soft shawl. She touches the wall lightly, sensing nothing unusual, and yet a quiet recognition hums beneath the surface, as if the apartment is aware of her gentle acceptance. She turns off the main light, leaving only a small lamp on the shelf. Its glow spreads in a mellow circle, smoothing the edges of every object. Shadows become soft, with no sharp corners, as if the darkness itself wants to be comforting. The stopped clock above the lamp looks almost decorative now, a quiet ornament instead of a reminder. She lets her fingers trail along the back of the sofa, feeling the familiar texture, and senses a subtle vibration in the air, like a distant, reassuring purr that comes from nowhere and everywhere at once. She sits cross-legged on the sofa and closes her eyes for a moment, listening with more than her ears. The silence carries a delicate pattern, like ripples in a pond that never fully formed into waves. There is an underlying rhythm, slow and steady, almost like a heartbeat that belongs to the space itself. As she inhales, she imagines the apartment inhaling with her, and as she exhales, she feels herself sink deeper into the cushions, as if the room is quietly holding her in place, keeping her safe between suspended moments. She opens her eyes and notices a faint glow along the edges of the bookshelf, barely there, like moonlight trapped in the grain of the wood. It does not illuminate the room, only hints at its own presence, a quiet line of softened brightness. She watches as it pulses once, very slowly, then returns to its calm state. The books themselves seem unchanged, their spines lined like the resting backs of old friends. The glow is not a warning. It feels more like a greeting, a polite nod from something that has just arrived and is pleased to meet her. Drawn by curiosity, she approaches the bookshelf and lets her hand hover above the glowing edge. The light does not brighten or fade. It simply remains, like a quiet eye watching without judgment. The air around her fingers feels slightly warmer, as though the room is gently exhaling there. No sparks, no sudden visions, only the soft awareness that she is not alone in this hush. The sensation is like resting her hand near a sleeping animal, feeling the faint warmth, and knowing it will not harm her. The apartment feels fuller, as if joined by a careful guest. She takes a step back and lets her gaze travel across the room. The small plant, the sofa, the lamp, the frozen clocks, all appear the same, yet the space between them has changed. It feels occupied, not by objects, but by attention, as if something kindly has settled into the gaps, blending with the quiet in a way that does not disturb. She realizes she does not feel watched in a human sense. It is more like being quietly included, as though the room and whatever has joined it are offering her a place in their stillness. A gentle warmth touches her cheek, as if a sunbeam has wandered indoors at midnight. She lifts her hand and feels nothing but the smooth air, yet the warmth remains, moving slowly like a soft line drawn along her skin. It lingers near her temple and then slides away, leaving behind a sense of being soothed, like a hand smoothing away a frown without actually touching. She exhales through a small smile, surprised at her own calmness. It feels natural to accept this contact, as if some distant kindness has reached across the quiet to reassure her. She wonders if she should speak, and the thought itself feels like a question placed gently into the air. Her voice, when it comes, is soft and low, barely more than a whisper. She simply says hello, letting the word dissolve into the quiet. For a heartbeat, nothing changes. Then the glow along the bookshelf brightens just slightly and fades again, like a small nod in reply. She feels no need to ask what has happened to time, or why the city is silent. Those questions can wait. For now, she is content with a single answered greeting. She walks to the bedroom, guided by the soft light spilling down the hallway. The bedside clock is frozen too, its luminous numbers steady and patient. She sits on the edge of the bed and listens, expecting the distant city sounds she is used to hearing through the walls. Instead, she hears only the gentle rhythm of her own breathing and a faint, soothing hum that seems to come from the very bones of the building. It feels like a lullaby built from stone and steel, singing without words, promising that there is more to this pause than emptiness. She stretches out on the bed, still fully dressed, the comforter wrapping her in familiar folds. The ceiling above is dim but not dark, as though the night itself has chosen to rest there in a gentle layer. Tiny flickers appear at the edges of her vision, like distant stars slowly deciding to show themselves. When she focuses on them, they soften, refusing to become sharp. It is as if they want her to look without straining, to simply accept their presence. She feels her thoughts slow, moving less like racing lines and more like drifting feathers. The faint flickers above her begin to form gentle patterns, never solid, always shifting like ripples across a dark lake. They move in slow, looping shapes that feel familiar, though she cannot say why. Watching them soothes the small muscles around her eyes, inviting them to relax. Each drifting shape seems to carry a quiet message, not in words, but in feeling. You are safe. You are seen. You are allowed to rest. She imagines that somewhere in those patterns, something that is not from this city and not from this time is breathing alongside her. As she watches the patterns, a sense of distance and closeness intertwines. It feels like lying beneath a sky that has folded itself into the room, bringing distant places into a reach that does not require movement. She senses that the presence above her is not singular, but also not crowded, more like a chorus of quiet minds sharing one soft voice. The idea of alien visitors crosses her mind, yet the word alien feels too hard, too sharp for what she perceives. These feel like neighbors from a gentler dimension, curious and considerate in their silence. She closes her eyes, and behind her lids the patterns continue, now drifting through her imagination. She feels a warmth at the center of her chest, not dramatic, just a small, steady glow that answers the quiet presence above. It is as though the apartment has become a meeting place between her slow heart and something vast and patient outside the flow of days. No one speaks, but she senses a question, gentle and exploratory, like a hand held out in greeting. The question is simple. May we stay with you while the clocks are resting? She does not answer with words, only with a feeling. She thinks of soft blankets, of evenings when there is nowhere to be, of quiet company that does not require conversation. She offers that sense outward, imagining it flowing through the walls, through the unmoving lights, through the paused numbers on every clock. The hum in the building deepens pleasantly, like a contented sigh. The still city outside feels less distant, as though the silence now includes more than absence. It includes her consent, her willingness to let this pocket of timelessness become a shared shelter. With her eyes still closed, she feels the faintest touch at the surface of her thoughts, like someone gently sorting through a stack of papers without reading them aloud. Memories drift up, small ones, of rainy afternoons, quiet rides on trains, the soft weight of blankets. None of them are pulled harder than they want to go. The presence seems to be listening for textures instead of stories, feeling the softness and slowness she carries. It does not push deeper, only lingers briefly and then withdraws, leaving behind the sense of having been understood without being exposed. She realizes this meeting is not about explanations. It is not asking her to solve anything or to name what has happened to time. Instead, it feels like a quiet experiment in kindness. The city is silent, the clocks are still, and something gentle has chosen her apartment as a place to sit and breathe. She imagines these visitors as beings who travel not through distance, but through pauses, appearing wherever the world grows quiet enough to notice them. The thought brings her comfort, like learning that the gaps in her days are doorways rather than emptiness. She rolls onto her side and opens her eyes, looking toward the doorway. The hall seems slightly brighter, as if lit from within the walls rather than by any single source. The edges of the doorway are softened, outlined by a mild radiance that pulses in a slow, sleepy rhythm. It feels like an invitation, not urgent, just a reminder that she is free to move through this stillness without breaking it. She swings her legs over the edge of the bed and stands, feeling the floor beneath her feet like a calm, steady heartbeat. She pads down the hallway, barefoot, the floor pleasantly cool. As she nears the living room, she sees small points of light drifting near the ceiling, slow and deliberate, like glowing seeds carried by an invisible current. They do not touch anything, only weave slow paths through the air, leaving behind faint trails that dissolve almost immediately. The glow along the bookshelf returns, matching their rhythm, as if greeting old friends. The effect is calming, like watching lanterns float on a quiet river. The whole room feels like a shared dream that has chosen a comfortable shape. She settles onto the floor this time, leaning against the sofa, choosing to be closer to the ground. The floating lights adjust, drawing into a loose circle above her, never cluttered, always leaving space between each other. She senses that this is their way of forming a face, not made of features, but of presence. She feels looked at, but not examined. It is the same feeling as sitting across from someone who is simply happy to be there, no conversation needed. The air around her shoulders seems to grow warmer, as though receiving a wordless welcome. One of the lights drifts a little lower, hovering at about the height of her eyes. It pulses softly, and for a moment she sees a faint image in its glow, like a reflection on a calm lake. Shapes that might be towers or trees or something entirely different rise and fall in the light, distant and serene. She realizes the visitors are sharing a glimpse of where they come from, not as a lesson, but as a bedtime picture, a gentle story made of light. The image fades, leaving behind a feeling of vast, quiet horizons. She lets her eyes rest half closed, watching the after-image of that distant place linger behind her lashes. It feels like a world where nothing rushes, where even the tallest shapes seem to stand not from ambition, but from a desire to offer shelter. She senses wide plains, slow clouds, and beings who communicate mostly in gentle pulses of color. The impression comforts her. If such a place exists, it makes sense that its travelers would move through pauses and silences, choosing resting hearts and quiet rooms as their landing sites. The small circle of lights overhead shifts again, this time arranging itself in loose lines that trace the outline of her apartment. She sees in luminous miniature the sofa, the plant, the shelf, the bed down the hall. It is as if the visitors are showing that they understand the shape of her space now, that they have learned its gentle geography. The tiny, glowing apartment hovers above her like a constellation, familiar and new at the same time. She feels an unexpected relief, knowing that her everyday refuge has been noticed and appreciated by something beyond it. In the miniature map of light, one point shines a little brighter, right where her bed would be. Another bright spot marks the window, the border between her private world and the silent city. The lights move slowly between these points, as if tracing the path she took tonight, step by quiet step. She realizes they have been watching not to judge, but to learn how she moves through the place she calls home. This awareness brings a gentle warmth to her chest, the comfort of knowing her simplest routines are meaningful to someone, somewhere. She whispers a thank you, without fully deciding to, letting the words slip out like a sigh. The lights respond with a slow, rippling pulse, like the surface of a lake touched by a single raindrop. The miniature apartment dissolves, and the lights disperse again, returning to their wandering paths near the ceiling. Yet the feeling of being held in a gentle awareness remains, woven into the walls and floor. The clocks are still stopped, yet she feels no impatience. Without the usual pressure of the minutes, gratitude has all the space it needs to stretch and settle. After a while, she rises and returns to the window. The city remains quiet, but she notices subtle differences now. Some windows glow with a slightly softer light than others, as if other rooms too have become resting places for these travelers. She imagines different apartments, different beds, different chairs where someone else sits in their own pocket of stillness, being visited by gentle patterns of light. The thought makes the silent city feel connected, like a network of lanterns that do not need roads. She feels less alone, even though she cannot hear a single sound. She rests her forehead lightly against the cool glass and imagines the visitors flowing through the city like a slow, luminous tide. They move wherever silence deepens, sliding through open windows, cracks around doors, and the spaces between heartbeats. They do not disturb traffic or machines. Instead, they gather in pauses, in the places where people finally stop to breathe. Her apartment tonight is one of those tide pools. The idea fills her with calm pride, as if she has quietly hosted a gathering of stars without needing to tidy anything or prepare. She wonders briefly if time has stopped everywhere or only here. The question floats in her mind, but she does not chase it. Whether the whole city shares this pause, or the effect is confined to her own walls, the feeling remains the same, a gentle suspension, like a held note that never strains. She senses that the visitors are not responsible for the stopped clocks. They are simply taking advantage of the stillness to be near. It is as if they have stepped into a quiet room the world accidentally left open. She moves away from the window and back to the sofa, curling into one corner with a blanket drawn around her. The fabric feels especially soft against her skin, each thread distinct yet joined, much like the presence in the room. The floating lights drift to a respectful distance, as if giving her space while remaining near enough to offer comfort. The hum in the building continues, low and steady, like a lullaby sung for both her and the visitors. The apartment feels more and more like a shared nest, built from pauses and gentle observation. She closes her eyes and lets her head rest against the cushion, listening as her breath joins the quiet symphony of the room. She imagines the visitors listening too, not to words, but to the shape of her breathing, the rise and fall that marks her presence in this timeless pocket. In her mind, each exhale becomes a small, warm cloud, and she pictures the lights drifting through those clouds, learning their texture, their softness. It feels like teaching someone to recognize comfort by letting them feel it directly, rather than describing it. At some point, without realizing exactly when, she drifts into a light sleep. In that blurred space, neither fully awake nor deeply dreaming, she finds herself standing in a version of her apartment where the walls are made of slow-moving starlight. The furniture glows faintly from within, as if filled with distant skies. The visitors appear here not as lights, but as gentle shapes of color and warmth, moving with unhurried grace. They do not speak, yet she understands that this place is a mirror of her home, filtered through their perception of it. In this dreamy version of her home, the clocks are present, but have no hands at all. Their faces are blank, but not empty. They shimmer faintly, like shallow pools reflecting an unseen sky. When she looks at them, she feels no desire to know the hour. Instead, she senses moods. The clock above the shelf holds a feeling of quiet relief, while the one by the bed glows with the softness of rest. The visitors seem to move around these handless clocks with gentle respect, as though they are sacred objects of stillness rather than tools. She reaches out to one of the handless clocks, and this time her fingers pass through the surface without resistance. It feels like dipping her hand into lukewarm water that remembers every touch. Tiny sparks of light form around her fingers, dancing briefly before disappearing. The visitors watch with kind attention, their colors shifting to match the warmth of her touch. She realizes that here, time does not measure, it receives. It collects every quiet moment and holds it gently, like a jar filled with soft glow. The realization settles over her like a second, lighter blanket. In the dream, she feels an invitation to leave the apartment of starlight and step into the hallway beyond. There, the walls are made of slow-flowing darkness, dotted with calm, distant lights, like a corridor carved through a galaxy. She understands, without anyone saying it, that this is how the visitors travel, through passages of quiet, slipping between worlds where time pauses long enough to let them in. They offer her a place beside them, not as a permanent resident, but as a guest, allowed to see their route. She feels honored, yet pleasantly unhurried. She walks with them for a while, each step feeling both weightless and secure. Through openings in the corridor walls, she glimpses other worlds in their resting moments. A quiet forest where every leaf is perfectly still. An empty train station bathed in soft golden light. A ship floating on a mirror-like sea. In each place, she senses the visitors pausing, listening, learning the shape of calm. It occurs to her that they are not studying danger or drama, but peace. They are collectors of stillness, archivists of gentle pauses scattered across countless lives. Eventually, the corridor bends in a slow arc, and she sees her own apartment ahead, floating like a small, warm island in the deeper dark. It glows with a familiar softness, inviting and modest. She understands that this journey is not meant to pull her away, but to show her how special her simple refuge is in the vast map of pauses. The visitors guide her to the doorway made of overlapping starlight, and she steps through without hesitation. The dream dissolves gently, like mist under morning light, leaving only the feeling of having seen something quietly important. She wakes on the sofa, with the blanket still tucked around her, the room dim and unchanged. The floating lights near the ceiling are fewer now, drifting slowly toward the corners as if preparing to rest themselves. The clocks remain frozen, but she feels no need to check them. Instead, she notices the lingering warmth in her chest and the gentle clarity in her mind, as if a night of deep rest has passed in this long moment. She understands that the dream was not separate from the visitors. It was their way of saying thank you. She sits up slowly, stretching her arms overhead, feeling each muscle respond with pleasant heaviness. The apartment feels familiar again, yet newly cherished, like a favorite room after being away for a while. The glow along the bookshelf has faded to a subtle memory, but she can still sense the presence woven into the grain of the wood, into the fibers of the rug, into the still air. She knows that the visitors may leave when time resumes, yet some gentle echo of them will stay, hidden in the way the room holds silence. As she moves through the apartment, she touches small things almost without thinking. The back of a chair, the corner of a picture frame, the cool surface of the kitchen counter. Each touch feels quietly acknowledged, as though the space itself is aware of her appreciation. Outside, the city is still silent, but somehow the quiet seems less absolute. It now holds layers of meaning, the absence of noise, the presence of gentle visitors, and her own decision to let this pause be a gift rather than a puzzle. She feels lighter, as if weight has left without explanation. She returns to the bedroom and sits on the edge of the bed again. This time, more awake, yet still wrapped in the soft strangeness of the night. The bedside clock continues its silent display of the same moment, firmly refusing to move forward. She realizes that, in a way, she has been given all the time she needs inside a single frozen minute. The pressure of what tomorrow will bring feels distant and gentle. There will be emails, messages, responsibilities, but they cannot reach her here. Not until the clocks decide to breathe in again. She lies down once more, this time slipping under the blanket, letting its weight encourage her to settle. The ceiling is plain again, no visible patterns or drifting lights, yet she senses that the visitors are not entirely gone. They feel more diffuse now, spread throughout the apartment like a gentle fragrance, almost impossible to point to, yet clearly there. She imagines them curled into the corners of the room, resting in the folds of the curtains, nestled behind the quiet hum of the building, taking their own kind of sleep after a long journey of pauses. As she drifts again toward sleep, she senses one last clear impression from them, like the residue of a soft touch on her thoughts. It is a promise, but not a demanding one. Whenever life becomes too loud, whenever days stack up like heavy stones, there will be pockets of stillness waiting. Some she will notice on her own. Others they may help create, slipping through tiny cracks in the noise. The apartment without time is not only this night, they seem to say, but any moment she allows herself to pause long enough to feel accompanied. Sleep takes her fully this time, deep and unbroken. No dreams rise to the surface, only a long, smooth darkness that feels neither empty nor crowded. It is like floating in warm, silent water that supports her weight completely. Somewhere, the visitors rest too, their own perception of time folded around this shared pause. The city remains in its peculiar stillness, yet no one suffers for it. No one is stranded or waiting in fear. The pause is gentle, like a held note in a piece of music that knows exactly when it will move on. When she finally stirs, there is no clear sense of how long she has slept. Her body feels refreshed, joints loose and comfortable, as if she has taken a long holiday in a single breath. She opens her eyes to a room that looks almost exactly as before. The blanket around her, the still clock, the faint light through the window. Yet she senses a subtle difference in the air, a quiet readiness, like a stage where the actors are about to return. Time has not moved yet, but it is gathering itself, stretching unseen limbs behind the scenes. She sits up and listens. The building hum is unchanged, but beneath it, she hears the faintest hint of something new. A far-off murmur, like a crowd heard through thick glass. The city is testing its voice again, warming it after a long silence. The visitors, by contrast, feel fainter now, more like a pleasant memory than an immediate presence. She realizes their visit is ending, gently, without ceremony. There are no bright departures, no dramatic flashes, only the slow fading of that extra layer of awareness, like mist dissolving as the air shifts slightly. She stands and walks toward the living room one more time. The floating lights are gone, but their paths remain in her mind like well-worn trails. The glow along the bookshelf has disappeared, leaving only the natural grain of the wood and the familiar shapes of the books. The wall clock still shows the same minute, holding the last trace of the pause. She feels a brief urge to reach up and tap the glass, to nudge time into motion, but instead she decides to wait. The moment deserves to end on its own terms. She returns to the window and opens it a small amount, the latch making a soft, familiar sound. This time, a faint breeze answers, brushing against her face and stirring the curtain in a lazy curve. Far below, a car engine coughs to life. A distant siren practices a single note before continuing on. Time has begun its slow, almost shy return. Inside the apartment, the air shifts subtly, as if someone has taken a deep breath. She glances at the digital clock on the microwave and sees the first change. The small dot blinks. She watches, entranced, as the minute changes. The numbers on the clock roll forward with quiet certainty, reclaiming their role. The wall clock flickers almost imperceptibly, and then resumes its ticking. Each sound surprisingly delicate, like raindrops on a soft surface. The building hum remains, but now it is joined by footsteps in the hall, a door closing somewhere, the faint clink of dishes from another apartment. The world is waking up from a nap it did not know it had taken. The visitors are no longer present, yet their absence does not feel like loss. She feels a strong, simple gratitude with no particular direction. It is for the clocks that stopped, for the silence that wrapped around her, for the soft presences that arrived through the pause, and for the fact that everything can now move again. She understands that nothing in her life has been dramatically altered. Her responsibilities remain, her routines will return. And yet, something subtle has shifted. She now knows that time itself can be kind, that in certain hidden moments it will step aside and let her share a room with a gentler rhythm. She makes a quiet promise to herself, spoken only within her mind. Whenever she feels overwhelmed, she will remember this night and create her own small pauses, turning off notifications, breathing at the window, letting herself sit without doing. She imagines the visitors noticing those personal stillnesses from wherever they travel, smiling in their own strange way, and perhaps slipping in for a brief visit. The idea turns simple acts of rest into invitations, not just for herself, but for gentle beings who collect calm as if it were the rarest treasure. The day will come, with its noise and brightness, but for a few more breaths she stays in the apartment that has just released time and company back into the world. She notices how every surface seems slightly more vivid, how the air tastes a little cleaner, as if the pause washed away a thin layer of dust from her perception. The clocks now tick in quiet agreement with her heartbeat rather than against it. The apartment without time still exists for her, not as a physical change, but as a memory she can step into whenever she closes her eyes. Standing once more in the doorway, shoes in hand, she takes one final look around before leaving for the day. The apartment appears utterly ordinary now. A sofa, a shelf, a window, a few clocks, a plant on the sill. Yet she feels the depth beneath these familiar details, the echo of stillness that hosted travelers made of light and patience. She smiles to herself, a small private gesture, and steps into the hall. Behind her, the door closes with its usual quiet click, but the night of stopped clocks lingers within her like a gentle secret. As she walks down the stairs, surrounded by the creaks and soft echoes of a building fully awake again, she feels surprisingly rested, as if she has just returned from a long, quiet journey. She knows that no one she meets today will notice anything unusual. Time for them has flowed as always. Yet she carries a new awareness, an inner balcony from which she can watch her own life without being swept away. The memory of the apartment without time sits gently at the back of her mind, waiting for the next moment when everything grows quiet enough. Outside, the city greets her with its usual blend of sounds and motion. Engines, footsteps, voices, distant signals. Yet she notices how these noises now form a kind of music instead of a wall. Between every honk and shout, there are tiny spaces where silence peeks through, like bright threads in a dense fabric. She imagines the visitors slipping along those threads, moving from pause to pause, checking in on anyone who unknowingly hosts them. The idea brings a quiet smile to her face as she joins the flow of the day, unhurried inside, no matter the clock. That night, after the day has finally softened at its edges, she returns to the same apartment door with a familiar key in hand. The building hums, the hallway whispers with distant televisions and closing doors, yet she feels a deeper quiet waiting behind the lock. She steps inside and pauses, listening. The clocks tick, steady and normal. The city murmurs beyond the glass. Nothing unusual happens, yet the memory of their shared stillness spreads through the room like warm tea. "Welcome back," the apartment seems to say. "Time is moving now, but we remember how to rest."